Happy Friday. Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. I'm Deanna. Happy bingo night. My beverage is on the way. Don't panic. It's all coming together. It almost didn't. You can see I'm in yet a new spot. Thank you so much. I definitely need more rosé. Cheers, my dears. How's it going this Friday night? So much going on. Lights breaking and things, just things. I hope it's nice and easy for you on Friday. You made it through the weekend. You are right on the threshold of the weekend. Hopefully a beautiful one. We are about to celebrate tonight. Hang on. Speaking of celebrating, cheers, my dears. Oh, I needed that. Summer, heat. It's getting so heat. I'm already so hot. I'm already complaining. We are about to celebrate in a huge way with our bingo night. I'm hiding in a corner of Teddy's room. Isn't that pathetic? I am. It's nice and quiet in here. He's got all his bedtime lights behind him. I've got a couple things to show you, and I've got our Wheel of Fortune right behind us. It is bingo night tonight, and I will explain that in just a minute for those of you who are new to playing. We often do, and we have always done thus far, rug hooking bingo, where we look at rugs. Tonight is going to be a little bit of a deviation. We are doing fine art bingo. Fine art is such a great source of inspiration, and we are constantly coming back to painters, painting styles, eras of designing, like all of these conversations. So tonight, I hope to open the can on a whole bunch of new artists that we have not talked about yet. That'll be so much fun for you this weekend. If you're interested, if you become inspired to be going down all these rabbit holes, it'll be a lot of fun. It's a great episode. 2 weeks in the making. I'm so sorry about last week with the food poisoning. That could not, I would never have done that on purpose. Diets or not. That was bad, but it is going to be twice as good tonight. Doreen, great to see you. Cheers, my dears. Carol, cheers, my dears. Hot and sunny in Wisconsin. Good for you. Things are turning around, I think, for everybody, right? We are hopefully getting a nice weekend. I shouldn't say it out loud. Kaz, great to see you. Happy bingo night. Really warm. High 80s. Oh, that's extremely warm. That's beyond comfort at that point. Linda, great to see you in New Jersey. Gloomy sky tonight, but cocktail time will definitely brighten things up for sure. Catherine, testing. Catherine, you're good. You're on. The testing is working. It's so hard sometimes to figure out why you can or cannot. It seems whimsical, doesn't it? Make comments in these threads on these videos. I think it usually is this big, sort of big brothery connection in the sky, wherever it originates, where you really need some kind of a Google account to be able to make comments in the thread. And sometimes that is the thing that stops people. But Catherine, you are working just great. I can see you there. Good to see you. Mom, happy cocktail night. You are not getting old. You cannot possibly be getting old. You just have such a busy life that you almost forgot to make a cocktail and tune in. That's all. Robin, great to see you. Another cheers in Wisconsin. We'll take as many as are there. Karen, great to see you. I'm almost out already. Linda in Massachusetts, great to see you. Lorraine, cheers from Whitby. Oh, Lorraine, great to see you. Welcome. Happy bingo night. Teresa, happy bingo night. Happy Friday. Daniela, great to see you. It is bingo night, Teresa, and it's a great one. It will be a lot of fun. It's part cozy, part rabbit holes. And great to see you Friday night, ready for bingo. And Barbara, great to see you. Happy Friday night. So while I'm waiting to be replenished, let me take one more sip and say cheers, my dears, one more time. I think we sold about 58 tickets. It's not our biggest night for sure with tickets, but it's more about the fun than the tickets. Lisa, happy bingo night. Great to see you. So for those of you who haven't played before, what we do on bingo night is, this is typical bingo, but maybe you haven't played bingo before. You have a sort of an abbreviated bingo card if you're playing that has 16 squares. We try to keep it kind of concise and a little bit shorter. 16 squares, so there's no centerpiece, right? And as I spin the Wheel of Fortune and cut the numbers off as they come up, right, I make the call and I'll say it's such and such, and then you look to see if it's on your card, and if it's on your card, you just cross that square out. Now, if you make a mistake, if we get tripped up, if there's confusion, any of these things, right, you know that you know, according to the way that the cards were sent out, there are 12 different cards, and I know exactly who has each card. Not off the top of my head, of course, but once we get to the end of the game and we know who the winning card is, and it should be one winning card, whether you have caught up or made some mistakes and you don't really want to say bingo because you're not sure, or whether you're watching this after the live show, you will be notified if you have the winning card. You will be notified and sent the code so you get however many dollars off in the store. And if you don't see something that you want at the store, just let me know, because you could get like a tool, like a hook or a punch or something like that, an Amish toothbrush, a Prati tool, something like that, or just backing fabric or plain wool, dyed wool. So you let me know if you're a winner and you want to get something and you're not seeing things that you like, because I have everything, right? It's just that website takes a lot out of me with updating, but I have anything that you would want for rug hooking or punching. So you're just crossing off squares as we make calls, and that's all there is to it. And if you get confused, absolutely write into the thread and say, you know, I got caught up, or I walked away and did this thing get called or whatever. That's absolutely fine. We're playing together, and that's absolutely fine. Linda Ann, hello, great to see you. Friday the 13th, I forgot. Oh, well, I'm so glad that worked out great for you. So Daniela, I just want to be sure you just got, so Daniela, you can probably still get a card. There's probably time. I'm going to be starting, but let me just send a note downstairs to send one. The link, can anybody tell me if the link is still in the description to this video? They're $3 a card, and you can at least get them even if you don't have time to print them, because then you know if you win, you win. And the return is usually quite good. It's usually in the 30s, right? We usually win, like 6 or 7 people win 30, something like that. So we'll see how that goes. But if anybody can let me know if the description is in there to help Daniela out, it should be in the description still. Annie, good to see you. Okay, good. Thank you. Thank goodness. Oh, it popped up on your phone in Ottawa. That's perfect. Sometimes technology is okay, right? Sometimes it's a real pain. That's not what I usually say, but yeah, sometimes it's okay for things like that. So we're just literally getting the bingo card, scratching off the calls. Good. Thank you so much. So I just want to show you what I'm working on here before we get going. It's just been nonstop busyness. I burnt myself so badly last night. If you're a Patreon member, I hope you got my message. I sent out a message this morning, early morning message for you. That said, you know, be looking out Saturday tomorrow at noon for patterns. I want to put the link for the patterns live so that the Patreon supporters have the first whack at the next vintage lot of patterns that I will combine shipping with if you already have patterns that you've got for me and you're waiting to see if there's more you like. I also dyed a new swatch set yesterday called Songs of a Summer Night. And it is a beautiful sort of Art Deco, evening-y, really different swatch set. I wish I brought it upstairs. I forgot. I was looking for a place to hide. So I'll bring that out tomorrow on the site or later today. Oh, great. Okay, well, you figured it out. It's great to solve these problems because they are so mysterious and abstract, right? So I was working on that, and then I started dyeing the cloth for the Amish toothbrush class. If you are anywhere in Connecticut, it is at Madison Wool on Sunday, and I burnt myself terribly. Amazing how burns can be so unmanageably painful, but then all of the sudden, there's the link, but then all of the sudden it just goes away, thank God. But I've been dyeing a bunch of sort of summery colored, it's brighter than it's looking on the monitor, cottons for the Amish toothbrush class with some little clippies, and everybody's also going to get like one of these to work on, because we pin as we go and work our Amish toothbrushes that way. That's coming up on Sunday. This is the Amish toothbrush I did for the book. One of the many kinds of rag rugs that's super easy and fun to do. For those of you who aren't local, I will be putting up a Zoom video to do Amish toothbrush. And believe it or not, that's like 6 yards of cotton. And the square, I like to work flat if you do Amish toothbrush. And it comes with those clippies that I think help too. And a bunch of T-pins will be in there and snippers. So it's basically everything you need to make a rag rug. And I'll be showing the braided rug. This is an 8-strand, but I'll be doing that shortly too. And then the crocheted rug. We'll see how it all goes. So much going on. It has been wild times. But I did manage to get this episode together, and I'm really excited about it. So I'm going to get started. So what I'm going to do now, again, the theme is fine art tonight. So we're looking at artists that I hope will surprise you. There will certainly be a few that you have heard of, without a doubt. But hopefully there's some new ones, some fun ones, some interesting ones. And of course, different paintings strike different people in different ways. And hopefully there will be some art in here that really strikes you, that makes you want to check that artist out or go down that rabbit hole, because I worked really hard to try to find some recognizable people. Familiar is nice too for balance, but mostly people who I think are really, really solid artists from modern period going back, like 200 years max. These aren't ancient paintings, but I think it's a nice mix up, and I think we're going to learn a lot. So let's get started. Let me make sure I'm up to date here. Take one more sip of my drink, and I'm going to need more soon, but for now this is all right. Just polishing off this bottle on a Friday night. Everybody have their card in front of them, got something to write with, ready to go. So I'm going to be, I even forgot, because it was 2 weeks ago, how these are named. Can somebody cue me and tell me on your bingo card, does it say the name of the artist? It must say the name of the artist, right? Not the name of the piece. That would be confusing, because there are two pieces that I've used the same artist, like they have two pieces in the show. So I'm going to assume that's how it goes. You tell me if I'm screwing up, because I defer to your better judgment and to your bingo cards that are sitting in front of you. Let's get going. Wheel of Fortune. Good luck, everybody. I wish you all the best of luck. I hope you win $1 million. There's not quite that much in the jackpot, but it'll still be fun and exciting to win. And scissors. Thank you so much. So first call is clearly for me, number 6. For you, and we're going to go to the slideshow. Yeah, right on top. Okay. We're going to go to the slideshow, and I will show you close up the picture that we're talking about. So for you, number 6 is, it is Wash Day on the Maine Coast by N.C. Wyeth. So let me pick up the picture, and you see whether this is on your card. If it is, okay, excellent, thank you. If it is, oops, wait a minute. No, that was a spoiler. I wanted to show that at the end. You didn't see that. You saw nothing, right? This is the call, number 6. Isn't this gorgeous? So, we have talked about Wyeth before, and the question always comes up, when I say, like, what artists would you like to see next when I run these design-like classes? Many people often say Wyeth, and sometimes I think you mean N.C. Wyeth, and sometimes I think you mean Andrew Wyeth, and there's several Wyeths who painted, right? This is N.C. Wyeth. He was more of sort of the illustrator. He provided illustrations for magazines and covers and things like that. His real name, again, this is called, I know, Lorraine, right? I mean, isn't that so unexpected? Wash Day. Wash Day on the coast of Maine. I think it is so sort of evocative. How do you find your card? So your card within the next couple of minutes will be emailed to you for sure. So the card will be emailed, and then if you have time to print it out and just start scratching them off, we can refresh your memory about the calls that we've had. But the winning card will win no matter what. But it should appear in your email box, whatever email is associated with where you just bought it, in the next 2 minutes. So N.C. Wyeth is interesting. He, again, more of an illustrator, born in Needham, Mass. in 1882, and he ends up living most of his life in Chadds Ford Township, Pennsylvania. He dies in 1945, and he's known as N.C. Wyeth, although his name is Newell Convers Wyeth. Hard name, right? He was an American artist and illustrator. He was a pupil of the artist Howard Pyle, who's certainly, I would say, the most famous artist associated with the golden age of illustration. I know we've talked about him. We will talk about him more. N.C. Wyeth became one of America's great illustrators, and during his lifetime, he created more than 3,000 paintings and at over 100 illustrations. He is the father of Andrew Wyeth and the grandfather of Jamie Wyeth. And of course, they are both well-known American painters as well. Ooh, let me shut that picture down. Oops. I'm sorry. That was Monday's show. That was Monday's show. Let me shut this one down for us so that we are fresh to go. That was what, 26. N.C. Wyeth. So interesting that one family can have that much talent. What's the difference between an illustrator and a painter? It's who pays you, isn't it? Has nothing to do with talent, and it has nothing to do with training. These people went to the same art schools and had the same colleagues and were in the same circles. But if Collier's Magazine pays you most of your money and you have a contract with them, they pay you for your illustrations, then you call yourself an illustrator. And if you're in part of the gallery circuit and that's your world, then you probably refer to yourself as an artist or a painter. But certainly not one is more or better than the other. It's just a question of language, isn't it? So MC Wyeth. Moving on to number 2, looks like number 14. So for you, that is, I'm going to put all the numbers onto the side. So if we need to recap them later, we can easily do that. Edmund Du Lac, Mask of Comus. So let's see. Excellent. Okay. So Danielle, you should be getting your card right now. It just takes a minute to email it. So let me come back to bingo, and we are doing Edmund Du Lac, Mask of Comus, number 14 for me. Let me come over here and let's look at this picture together. Hopefully it's on your card and you already found it. Wow. Now, I mean, this is so decorative and beautiful. It's crazy. So Edmund Du Lac, born Edmund Du Lac, exactly his name, different spelling though. 1882 to 1953. He was French-British. He naturalized. He was a magazine illustrator, a book illustrator, and very particular, a stamp designer, like postage stamps. He was born in Toulouse and he studied law, but he later turned out to be more of an artistic spirit, a free spirit. Excellent, Daniela. Thank you. He moved away from law. He got his first commission to illustrate novels by the novels of the Bronte sisters. So he did a series of those. And during World War I, he produced relief books, right? Very specific kind of illustration as well. And when after the war, the deluxe children's book market really shrank, as you would expect, right? He turned to magazine illustrations more, new ventures, looked for more work, designed banknotes, for England during World War II. And that was when he designed postage stamps too. Most notably, those that heralded the beginning of Queen Elizabeth II's reign. So interesting. So he did a lot of different things. This mask scene is like a masquerade, of course, right? Very bohemian, really of its period, right? It's a lot of one thing. This is not an image for everybody, but it's very fantastical. It's very whimsical. It's a lot of fun. It's in the pure illustrative vein that Edmund worked in, and just a really different piece, really different. Edmund Du Lac. All right, let me bring you down here. Let's see what our next call is. Da-da-da. Oh, we got to go with the closest one. I think it's going to be this one, right? Number 22, which is, got to get a system here. I'm putting things in all the wrong places. Let's see. 22 is, man, I need an assistant, don't I? Joe Grundy. And this piece is called Under the Blossom Tree. So let me bring that to you. Joe Grundy, Under the Blossom Tree. I know, I remember what this looked like. It's so pretty. So Joe Grundy, J-O-G-R-U-N-D-Y, Under the Blossom Tree, is a contemporary artist. And most of the sort of biographical information that I'm getting to you tonight is based on things that I found on Wikipedia, right? Because that's the low-hanging fruit for me. But when I'm going to a different site, I did find a lot of fantastic sites that supported the work and biographies of this artist. So just looking at the thread with you. So knowing that when I'm using text that's from a specific website that you might want to check out too, I will tell you that it is something other than Wikipedia. Otherwise, it's Wikipedia. This is Joe Grundy's own site. So it's called www.joegrundyart.co.uk. Soy Chili Productions. Oh, that's Teddy. That scared me for a second. That's my son Teddy downstairs. He created a company called Soy Chili Productions. Interesting. The first call, Daniela, so the calls we have so far are 6, 14, and 22. Teddy, don't write anything crazy, please. So Joe Grundy wrote this of herself on her website. She wrote, I was born and brought up on a farm in West Berkshire, this is England, and this has given me a lot of love of nature and the English landscape, which I hope to convey in my stylized, whimsical paintings. After taking time out to have my 2 children, I initially created homemade greeting cards, but as this brought in only a small income, I started to work on developing my painting style. My main inspiration comes from the ever-changing seasons, the English landscape, with my favorite season being winter, as I love to see the structure and the detail of the trees and the hedgerows. My winter scenes are very popular, with many selling before they even are finished. I have, let me come back to you as I do this. Beautiful piece, isn't that, Under the Blossoms? She says, I have been selling my work mainly online for over 7 years. Again, she's a contemporary artist, and have many of my images licensed for greeting cards, prints, cross-stitch kits. I never initially thought about licensing, but it is a direction that found me, and it's lovely to see my work as cards and other products, and who knows where it will all lead. That's so hopeful and promising, isn't it? And her work is so beautiful. We have looked at her on the episode we did on Diane Cox, right, from Penzance. We covered Joe Grundy because Joe Grundy was one of her favorite artists, so that's in that episode as well. Oh, you're all helping each other. Thank you so much. All right, moving on to, this looks certainly like number 15. Get that off. And that means, oh, I dropped it. I don't trust myself. All right, let's see. I'm going to have to wet my whistle in a second, too. 15. I'm looking all at the artists that are to come. This is such a good one. I hope that this is new to you because this is such a good one. Archibald Motley. And the piece is called Cocktails. So let me bring that up for you. Archibald Motley, Cocktails. I did it again. Oops, that was our episode the last time we were together. Let's see. This is where we are now. Archibald Motley, Cocktails. Isn't this phenomenal? So Archibald John Motley Jr., born 1891, died, get this, 1981, right? So good old age, was an American visual artist. He studied painting at the School of Art Institute of Chicago during the 1910s, graduating in 1918. I'm going to pause to say, doesn't this look like a much more contemporary piece? I mean, he graduated in 1918. Motley is most, and it's Motley. Motley is most famous for his colorful chronicling of the African American experience in Chicago during the 1920s and 1930s, and is considered one of the major contributors to the Harlem Renaissance, a time in which African American art reached new heights, not just in New York, but across America, certainly in Chicago. Now, isn't this just a stunning piece? It's such a sort of celebratory piece. Everybody's dressed up. There's somebody serving cocktails. It seems like a party, but very relaxed and small party. The lampshade is just an interesting detail. It's providing a little bit of light, but it really draws attention to the really exciting and different hats that are on the ladies' heads, right? They almost look like paper hats, and it makes me think, is it New Year's Eve? Are they doing stuff with paper crowns? That kind of thing. I'm just shutting the door over. I also love in this piece this beautiful, it looks like a sort of opalescent, pearlescent glass light fixture coming down as a chandelier. And isn't it interesting to note details like the andirons, like the mantle clock, but most specifically, really old-time folk art classical painting. Look out for my drink. Wait. I'll show you in a second.
It's Jocelyn.
It's Jocelyn. No. You want to say hi? Let me get rid of this. Here she comes. She came in from the trampoline, in from the hills.
No, from
What's
Charlotte's
the year he
house.
painted around? Yeah, 1920s, 1930s, Karen. Here, come in and say hi. There she is.
There's
She is
mustache.
sweat. Wow. What's on your face? What's on your face, Joss?
Chalk.
Okay, off she goes. Off she goes to wash her face. I want to run the show. See you later. Isn't that funny that so many times a day I have to say, what's on your face? I mean, when you get older, that doesn't happen so much, right? Just like the I got stuck, I'm stuck thing. I keep telling them, when you're older, you don't really get stuck. Like, it rarely happens that you have to shout from 2 yards away that you're stuck. Amazing. So you got some buddies saying hi to you. Karen said, I can hear the jazz in the background. Absolutely. I love those traces of the old world, like the classical style paintings in this really artsy, bye sweetie, shut the door, jazz age painting, 1920s, 1930s. So interesting, isn't it? Archibald Motley, when you look him up and look at some of his other images, they are all that interesting and exciting. And it is such a moment in time. And it's so nice that it is so closely tied to the Harlem Renaissance and the African American movement at that time. Very fine art. I'm not seeing numbers, just pictures, so you're marking them off. Exactly. It's numbered for me, just so it's faster for me. But for you, you've got the words, not the numbers. I'm saying the numbers to cue myself. I need as many cues as I can get. So for me, I'm not going to say the number because I don't want to be confusing. Your next call is Howard Chandler Christy, a piece called Louis Sherry Chocolates. So let me bring you there to, let me see. Again, I don't want to make this one any bigger because the photo resolution quality is not that good. So looking at it like this is, I think, as good as it gets. Howard Chandler Christy, Louis Sherry Cocktails. This piece was done in 1925. Howard Chandler Christy was born in 1872, died 1954. He was an American artist and illustrator famous for the Christy Girl, of course named after him. The Christy Girl was a colorful and illustrious successor to the Gibson Girl, who came immediately before. So after the era of the Gibson Girl in that costume, if you can picture it, came this girl. And this really lovely sort of all-American looking girl is known as the Christy Girl. Lesser known than the Gibson Girl, but still, if you were around at that time, this would have been like just part of your daily vocabulary. Christie's also widely known for his iconic World War I military recruitment and Liberty Loan posters, along with his 1940 masterpiece titled Scene at the Signing of the Constitution. So he did a lot of sort of patriotic work as well. From the 1920s until the early 1930s, Christie was active as a portrait painter whose sitters included presidents, senators, industrialists, movie stars, and socialites. He painted Theodore Roosevelt and Presidents Warren Harding, Calvin Coolidge, Herbert Hoover, Roosevelt, Truman. Other famous people he painted were William Randolph Hearst, the Prince of Wales, that was Edmund VIII, Mussolini, Prince Umberto, and Amelia Earhart. By 1938, Time magazine proclaimed Christie the most commercially successful artist in the U.S. So he is kind of living around the time. He crosses with some other famous artists like Rockwell, but you can see his style is quite different. And that was a chocolates ad, like for chocolate candies that we were looking at. But you can see how his work really suited selling. He was very good at marketing stuff and also portraits. So Christie's another one that you might want to look up. There's not a ton of biographical information about him personally, but he was a celebrity in his day. Cheers, my dears. All right, let's go. All right, let's see. This is for me. This is 24. I'll tell you what it is for you. I just want to cut them off so I don't say them twice because you know I will. All right, let's see where we are. Nope, this one's way down the bottom. 22, there we go. Ooh, wait a minute, there it is. Okay. Ooh, this is cut off. Elsa Besco, The Children of the Forest. Elsa Besco, The Children of the Forest. So, some of my stuff is cut off. That's kind of scary. Let me bring this to you and look together at Children of the Forest. So, maybe Elsa Besco is she's quite well known. Very familiar as an illustrator of very early 20th century books, right? Her life is between 1874 and 1953. She's a famous Swedish author and illustrator, but her work certainly has come to the U.S. decades ago as postcards, as translated children's books, right? A really prolific illustrator. Among her better known works are The Tale of the Little Old Woman and a book called, get this, Aunt Green, Aunt Brown, and Aunt Lavender. Doesn't that sound like it could be a great rug design? Aunt Green, Aunt Brown, and Aunt Lavender. There is such a story right there. She was born and studied art education at Kunstfach, that's a dangerous one to say, University of Arts, Crafts and Designs. It was then called Teknista Skolan, that one's easier, Teknista like technical skolan, like school, in Stockholm. That's your favorite one so far, Linda Ann? Oh, it is so charming, isn't it? It has such a storytelling quality to it. So she married a former minister and social worker who was also a doctor of theology called Nathaniel Bescow in 1897. And she met him while she was working as a teacher at a school where he was the headmaster. Together they had 6 sons, including the artist Beau Bescow, who's a famous artist in his own right, and famous geologist Gunnar Bescow. So isn't it funny how within one family, again, you get so much talent. It really must be in the genes. Bescow frequently combined the reality with elements from the fairy tale world. That's exactly what we're seeing here. Children meeting elves or goblins and farm animals talking with people. Central themes were relationships between children and adults and children's independent initiative. That's interesting, isn't it? Children kind of, this is something that we don't really advocate in modern children's books. Children just wandering off into the forest by themselves, right? But this, these kinds of themes were very, very common in books of this period. So her work depicted a very sort of happy home atmosphere and very Swedish countryside in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. There is now such a thing since 1958 as the Elsa Besco Award. It was created, at her death, right after her death, to recognize the year's best Swedish picture book illustrator. So I think that has got to be just about the best and nicest kind of legacy that there is when an award gets named after you because you've done such great work and blazed such a trail, right? So let's see. Let's see where we are with this one. Coming up to... my favorite, Ralph Cahoon. Ralph Cahoon, I didn't even put what, Patchwork. Ralph Cahoon Patchwork. I think that's the title of this. Let me come to that so you can see what it looks like and you can cross it off your card if you've got it on there. Ralph Cahoon Patchwork. There we go. Yeah, that's definitely Patchwork. I mean, isn't this great? He's one of my favorite artists for sure. Always has been. Ralph Cahoon, born in Chatham, Massachusetts. That's Cape Cod. That's where we go for our vacation every summer. We're headed there in a couple of weeks. His life was between 1910 and 1982. He was born in Chatham to a family that directly descended from the first Dutch settlers of Cape Cod. What an honor and a privilege, right? Growing up close to the Atlantic Ocean, young Ralph spent many of his days sailing, fishing, digging for clams, and sketching the coast. As he grew older, clamming and fishing slowly became secondary to his burgeoning interest in art. By the time he attended high school, he had started to apply his artistic interest and talent by taking a correspondence course in cartoon drawing and even submitted works to the school paper. Cahoon, just in case it's not written there, is Cahoon. His formal training was at Boston School of Practical Art. He only went there for 2 years and then he couldn't go anymore because of the financial troubles that his family was having because of the Great Depression. I'm going to come back to you with my face in a minute, but I just want to look at this together before I continue with him. Some people I talk more about because I think their lives are just extraordinary. This, I think, is so appealing for us as textile people. You've got all of these signature things, Cape Cod things. You've got the whale. You've got the mermaids with the pearls in their hair, little topless bosoms, little lighthouse in the background, and clipper ship, all of those things. But then you've got on the whale, the advertisement. Looks like paper doll cutouts. Absolutely. And that would be a great way to approach putting a composition like this together, right? Using templates, stencils, paper dolls, anything like that. It's very flat, folky, and naive, right? The advertisement on the whale says Cape Cod Patchwork Company, Inc. And they are working on a Baltimore album sampler. But also in the bottom left-hand corner, there's a little sailor who's gone overboard, probably after a mermaid swimming in between the squares of patchwork that haven't been utilized yet, and a beautiful actual patchwork quilt as opposed to an applique quilt. I'm going to come back to you here. He has such an interesting story, and I have so much love for Cahoon. he fits so well into our sort of folk whalehouse. He is not copyright free. But looking at his work is a huge inspiration. So definitely go down that rabbit hole. His young career took a dramatic turn in 1930 when he met and married in 1932 a young woman called Martha Farnham. Now, this is really important because Martha's dad had a furniture decorating business, and this is going to be the turning. You know how there's always these stories where there's a great turning point in someone's life. In Ralph's life, this is the moment. This is the turning point. So he marries Martha, whose dad has a furniture decoration business, and it's very successful. So after the marriage, the Cahoons moved to Osterville on Cape Cod, then later to Cotuit, where the house still is. I'll tell you about that in a minute. And they start together a very successful business decorating and selling antique furniture. So they're buying old furniture at old sort of antique shops and outside auctions and old farms and fields, and they're decorating it in the most tasteful way, I promise. In 1953, their careers took another twist when one of their customers, a wealthy New York socialite, convinced them to start painting and framing their paintings. So painting on wood, but then framing it. And they did. And they started selling like crazy in her gallery and all over the place. So they were doing their furniture decoration because that's where the work with the dad had led them. But then they got into this sort of painting, gallery art, and that was a completely new world that carried them into the sort of top circles of society. Jackie Kennedy was one of the great collectors of the Cahoons. Big names were collecting them. They both painted in their lifetimes and for all of the decades ensuing. So Ralph painted whimsical scenes like the one we saw of sailors and mermaids frolicking on the backs of whales, hot air balloons, majestic ships, and countless other fantastic, literally, settings. And as the commissions grew, Ralph would often incorporate, and this is interesting to know, the patron's business or home or profession in the way that the mermaid looked or the buildings in the background. I think that is so interesting. In the end, Ralph Cahoon's paintings were successful because they attracted a client base of wealthy, old money families that frequented, vacationed, or owned estates on Cape Cod and the islands. The carefree, light-hearted antics portrayed in Ralph's paintings appealed to the patrons' romantic associations with the Cape and were neither pretentious nor controversial. That is a thing, isn't it? They were just light-hearted. He continued to paint up into his death in 1982, and Martha, his wife, continued painting after his death, and even in the waning years of her life. She died. She was even working in crayon at the end of her life, right, when she was a bit beyond being able to paint. She died in 1999. So just a beautiful story. And she's in this game too, so we'll see if her name comes up later. But the house where they lived in Cotuit is now the Cohun Museum, and I'll certainly go there when I go to the Cape and take a video for you, because they have got the work of the Cahoons. They have got sailors' valentines, if you know what sailors' valentines are. Tons of beautiful folk art that, as textile artists that are working in like a folk craft, is so appealing and timeless and beautiful. Lily, good to see you. Oh, that's all right. There's always going to be more, right? Let's see who's next. Wouldn't it be funny if it was Martha? Let's see. Probably not. Let me just wet my whistle real quick, and then we'll carry on. Changed wines. That one's a bit livelier. All right, let's see. The next call is going to be Margaret Keane. Margaret Keane, In the Garden. So let me bring you to Margaret Keane, In the Garden, right here. Pretty recognizable artist, right? I think a lot of us know who this is. Margaret Keane. She was born Peggy Doris Hawkins in 1927. She is still alive. She's an American artist that's known for her paintings of subjects with big eyes. She mainly painted women, children, and animals in oil or mixed media. You might know this story already, right? Her work was often criticized, and still is, because everybody says she worked to a formula, like cookie cutter paintings, and it was very cliche. The artwork, and this is the really horrific part of the story, and maybe you've seen this movie, the artwork was originally attributed to Keane's ex-husband, Walter Keane. He, all during her career, pretended that the paintings were his. He started showing them in like the 1950s as his own work, right? And I mean, this is a horrible story. After their divorce in the 1960s, Margaret claimed credit for her paintings, which was established, get this, after a court paint-off in Hawaii. It came down to a paint-off to prove that he couldn't paint at all. Now, the resurgence of interest in Margaret Keane's work followed the release of Tim Burton's 2014 biopic, right, biography picture called Big Eyes. Big Eyes. Margaret maintains a gallery in San Francisco, which boasts the largest collection of her work in the entire world. In light of the great gulf between her work's popularity, which is huge, and its critical lampooning, she has often been called the Wayne Newton of the art world. So you take it or you leave it. It is what it is. This is what she's always done. She has made a fortune doing it. And I say good for her. Good for her. And shame on her husband, Walter, for pretending it was his work. Can you imagine a grown man? Can you imagine? Oh, that story makes me so upset. I have not seen the movie yet, but I know it was a big deal, and I hope to see it. I know it's going to wind me up, so I need to be in a good, calm state before I watch a movie that's based on a wind-up, right? So let's see. Next call is going to be Keith Haring. Keith Haring, dolphin rider. So let me bring you over here and let's find Keith Haring. I'm going to show you the image and then you scratch it off. Hopefully you have it. Keith Haring, dolphin rider. Keith Allen Haring, 1958 to 1990, was an American artist whose pop art emerged from the New York City graffiti scene, subculture of the 1980s. His animated imagery has become a widely recognized visual language. Much of his work includes sexual allusions that turned into social activism by using the images to advocate for safe sex and AIDS awareness. Haring died in 1990 of AIDS-related complications. So this is part of his story. This is part of his legacy. We're going to be talking more about him as we come into June for Pride Month. I think that he's very recognizable, right? Most people know exactly who he is because of Swatch watches, because of the 1980s, because of he was one of the major artists of the period when I was growing up in the 80s. I mean, pins, clothing, everything bore his images. And Dolphin Rider is not one of the more sort of famous ones, but I thought it was an interesting one. And, he did a lot of the images. He repeats a lot of images. He does them many times in different colors. So we tend to see the same thing over and over in different colors. Many, right? It's vast. It's different. It's art with a message. It's pop art, right? It really is. When we think about pop art, I think we tend to sometimes confuse pop art with op art, which is optical art. We think about Warhol, and we think about repeats, and we think about things that bring your eye, like Escher, to different places. Pop art is also Keith Haring. I mean, pop art literally is popular art, and it doesn't get any more popular than Keith Haring was in the 1980s. All right. How's everybody doing? You getting some things crossed off your sheet? Is it starting to look all hangman? It's very early in the game, right? So here we come. Let's see who this is going to be. Ooh, wait a minute. Got some butterfingers here. Grandma Moses, The Checkered House. Grandma Moses. So let's come see Grandma over here. Let me bring the image up for you. I do love our slideshows. I do. I'm so glad I figured this thing out. Grandma Moses, The Old Checkered House. I mean, so beloved, right? So beloved. Anna Mary Robertson Moses, 1860 to 1961, 101. Grandma Moses was an American folk artist. She began painting in earnest at the age of 78. There's hope for everybody, right? 78. And is a prominent example of a newly successful art career at an advanced age, right? Really the definitive. He was awful, Daniela. He must have been awful. And he looks like such a handsome man. Margaret's husband, what was his name? Wayne. Walter Keane. He looks so nice and friendly and kind. And yeah, he must have been a real, you fill in the blank. You do Mad Libs and you fill in the blank. So Grandma Moses's works have been shown and sold worldwide, including museums, merchandising, greeting cards. In 2006, her work called Sugaring Off was sold for $1.2 million. That's a goodly amount of money. I wouldn't be surprised if since then, this is Wikipedia, but I wouldn't be surprised if since then that record has been topped. Moses appeared on magazine covers, on television, and in biographical documentary. Her autobiography is called My Life's History, won numerous awards. The New York Times said, and I'll come back to you in a minute, the simple realism, nostalgic atmosphere, and luminous color with which Grandma Moses portrayed simple farm life and rural countrysides won her a wide following. She was able to capture the excitement of winter's first snow, Thanksgiving preparations, and the new young green of oncoming spring. In person, Grandma Moses charmed wherever she went. A tiny, lively woman with mischievous gray eyes and a quick wit. She could be sharp-tongued with a sycophant and stern with an errant grandchild. And this is interesting. I'm going to come back to you here, and I'm going to move away from this image called the checkered house. It's just so different, isn't it? I've seen a checkered barn near me in Connecticut. It's actually plaid. It's like a winery, but there's a barn there too. I don't know if the checkered house is a real thing, but I would love to know. It's such an odd subject, right? Grandma Moses was a live-in housekeeper for 15 years, starting at the age of 12, right? Starting her work life at the age of 12. An employer noticed her appreciation for their prints made by Currier and Ives, and they supplied her with drawing materials. You wonder how these things began. Moses and her husband began their married life in Virginia, where they worked on farms. In 1905, they settled in Eagle Bridge, New York. They had 10 children, only 5 of whom survived infancy. Grandma Moses was an embroiderer, and she embroidered patterns and pictures with yarn until her arthritis got so bad that she switched to painting. She was a member of the Society of Mayflower Descendants, don't get me started, and the Daughters of the American Revolution. These are things that break my heart because I would do anything to be in either of these groups. Her 100th birthday was proclaimed Grandma Moses Day by the New York governor at the time. Life magazine celebrated her birthday by featuring her on the cover of the September 1960 issue. That would be a nice thing to have. The children's book, Grandma Moses' Storybook, was published in 1961. She died at 101 years old in December of 1961 in Hoosick Falls, New York. I love that town. And you know, that town, they have this movement going. There's tons of barns. They have those big, what do they call, the wooden quilt things? You know, it's like a quilt square on the side of a barn made of wood. What's that called? It's like a quilt trail, but does it have a special name? Like a full-size, you know, like not one block. Well, actually one block, but sometimes they're quite involved with like 9 patches or something. But like every other house in Hoosick Falls has that. One of these days I'm going to go back because I went like at dusk by accident one day coming back from an antique store. I have got to go and photograph all of those and post them on our page so we can look at them because it's so cool seeing these big, huge quilt squares all over town. So she dies in Hoosick Falls, and when she did, President Kennedy at the time memorialized her by saying, quote, I'm not going to do his voice, the death of Grandma Moses removed a beloved figure from American life. The directness and vividness of her paintings restored a primitive freshness to our perception of the American scene. Both her work and her life helped our nation renew its pioneer heritage and recall its roots in the countryside and on the frontier. All Americans mourn her loss. So, big deal. She was also a great friend of Norman Rockwell. What a lady, right? You have her 4th of July picnic print. Barn quilts. Thank you, Linda. Thank you. Barn quilts, of course. I got to take pictures of those. Hey, if you know another place that does this kind of barn quilting, I know that there's books on it, like the barn quilts of whatever. But I'm wondering if there's more in this part of the country, the Northeast, because that was just the ultimate scavenger hunt for me, driving around and seeing them. But it was just too late in the day to start taking photos. Something to go back for. All right, I'm going to come over here. All right, let's see. Grandma Moses. What an inspiration, right? I mean, really. You know, wouldn't you love to see some of Grandma Moses's needlework stuff? I don't even know if it's out there, but I mean, if it is, we should try to find it and look at it together because that would be so interesting. Not that her paintings aren't enough and great, but that would be really interesting. The next call is K. Nielsen. K. Nielsen. Let me bring that to you. Let's see. K. Nielsen. There we go. There we go. Maybe familiar, right? If you've ever been like deep into fashion design or Art Deco illustration, perhaps K. Nielsen came up. K. Nielsen is a man. He's Danish, right? So this is like a man's name in Denmark. K. Rasmus Nielsen, the years of his life, 1886 to 1957, Danish illustrator who was popular in the early 20th century, the golden age of illustration. He has such an interesting story. Get ready for this. Nielsen was also known for his collaborations with Disney, for whom he contributed many story sketches and illustrations for several things, but not the least of which is Fantasia, right? So if you can picture Fantasia, you can see how this kind of style really appealed to Disney for that project. Nielsen showed up with his portfolio at the Disney Studios front door in late 1938. Joe Grant, who was the head of Disney's character model department at the time, said, "Jesus, this guy's great." That's a quote. He remembered that in a 1994 interview. The Disney Studio newsletter that was called The Bulletin described the artist as internationally known as the illustrator of fine books. When it was announced that he began his employment with Disney, that was in 1939, his job was to artistically imagine this classical music piece that they were just starting on called Fantasia. This is a tall order. K. Nielsen was born in Copenhagen, Denmark, again, 1886. His parents were actors. His father also directed. His mother sang. And K wrote, I'm going to come away from this because you saw this picture, and it really is. It's so Disney, isn't it? It's so cross between fashion and Disney, so whimsical. K wrote of his life, like later on, he wrote quite a bit in terms of memoir. And he wrote, about both of his parents being actors and his dad also a director and his mom also a singer. He wrote, "In this tense atmosphere of art, I was brought up." So he kind of jokes about this just very bohemian family that he comes from. And I guess it was inevitable that he would go into the arts, right? Coming from this really extreme art family. He wrote quite a few autobiographical sketches in his lifetime. And one of the great sort of controversies about his life is that Disney did fire him in the end. And it really, there's so many articles online. I couldn't read them all because I had a lot to do, but K. Nielsen is known to Disney, or in retrospect, as the one who got away, because he was fired and he did such good work for Fantasia. And so many people said after the fact, how could Disney ever have let him go? He was so important to the direction that they were going in. And if you can picture it, they went from Fantasia to really cutesy stuff after that. But it does make you wonder if they had stayed with K. Nielsen as like the person who was imagining and realizing storylines, coming up with the look of the piece, their future work might have looked very different, right? Fairy tale, but a bit more sort of high art fairy tale, less cutesy, less soft. It's an interesting what if, isn't it? Gaynor, great to see you. You watched that movie. It made you so angry. It's going to make me angry too. I might as well watch it while I'm either having some nice drinks or I'm already angry, right? Because I've heard that is just so aggravating watching that movie Big Eyes. But it must be a great movie too. Kay says, wasn't he also famous for his fairies? Karen, I don't know. I know he was famous for his fashion sketches because he's like a contemporary of the famous artist Erte. And I know that they knew each other and worked together a lot. So outside of his fashion sketches and this piece, I don't know a lot about him off the top of my head, but it's entirely possible. It does look, his work does look like the fairy illustrations that are associated with Arthur Conan Doyle, right, of Sherlock Holmes. Remember how Arthur Conan Doyle, unfortunately, at one point in his life, kind of lost it and he began to believe actually in fairies. Those illustrations look like K. Nielsen's, but that's not K. Nielsen, just in case that's what you're thinking of, because that's very close in style to the picture we just looked at. K. Nielsen does more, like, he looks more like the Vogue covers of the 1910s and 20s than he does like illustrations for fairies, as far as I know, but I don't know everything by any means. But the whole fairy thing with Conan Doyle was a weird thing too, because I don't know if you remember this story or have read this story in the past, but but Conan Doyle was a great friend of the magician Houdini, and he did believe like truly in fairies, like truly believed in them, and tried to photograph them, right? And he also believed in Houdini, right? And Houdini kept saying to him as a friend, listen, what I do is magic. It's tricks. I'm an athlete. I perform. I give performances. This is not magic. I'll tell you exactly how I do it. And Conan Doyle would not listen to Houdini. And it estranged the two friends. Like Houdini could not do it at a certain point because it was so aggravating talking to somebody, like talking to a wall. And isn't that kind of odd and sad? But you know what happened? I think they lost a child, Conan Doyle and his wife. I think it was something like that. Or maybe it was his wife. He had a big loss in his life, and he started to get really into seances and otherworldly stuff, and he began to get kind of panicked and clinging to anything he could that was a little bit on the supernatural side, and it didn't end well for him with the fairies. He did what is it called? The Cottingham. Isn't it called the Cottingham Fairies? Is that what it's called? The fairy book. You know, if somebody pulls up the Cottingham Fairies and it was illustrated by Kay Nielsen, I'm gonna. No, I won't. I won't stab myself in the throat with scissors. But I'll drink that whole glass of wine in one shot. So I hope that you find that out. Okay, next call. I won't say the number, but interesting. Little rabbit holes all over the place. It's like a little minefield. All right, let's see. Your next call is George, a contemporary of Nielsen. George Barbier, Eventales. What a great name. We got to get on making a piece called Eventales, right? I'm going to show you what this looks like. I'm so careful when I do the slideshow thing because I never know if I click the wrong thing what'll happen. This is quite a famous piece. George Barbier, Eventales, same exact era. This was done in 1924. George Barbier's life is between 1882 and 1932. He's known as one of the great French illustrators of the early 20th century. Again, really well known for fashion illustration, right? Same kind of look. He was born in Nantes, France. When he was 29 years old, he mounted his first solo exhibition. Incredible. It was in 1911. Subsequently, he was swept into the forefront of the profession with commissions, theater design projects, ballet, costumes, book illustrations, haute couture, fashion illustrations. For the next 20 years, Barbier led a group from the École des Beaux-Arts who were nicknamed by Vogue the Knights of the Bracelet. The Knights of the Bracelet. So, Cottingley Fairies. Now, who's the illustrator on the Cottingley Fairies? It's not Conan Doyle, right? There must be a different illustrator. Interesting. Interesting. I love our side conversations. So, the Knights of the Bracelet, right? That's a reference to all the fashion illustration that these guys did because obviously fashion was huge in this period. Where did I leave off? A tribute to the fashionable and flamboyant mannerisms and style of dress of that time. Included in this elite circle, Brezard, that's another very famous, Pierre Brezard was another famous artist with a very similar look, and Bernard Boutet. And both of those artists working in this period, similar look, hugely successful, both happened to be Barbier's first cousins. Incredible, right? Incredible. During his career, Barbier also turned his hand to jewelry design, glass, wallpaper design. He wrote essays and articles. In the mid-1920s, he worked with Erte, that big name, to design sets and costumes for the Folies Bergère. Barbier died in 1932 at the very pinnacle of his success. He is buried in the cemetery Misericord in Nantes. Let me come back to you here. Hold on. Let me come back to you. France. And it was extremely hard to even get this much information on Barbier. There's hardly anything biographical online. So apparently when he died in 1932, it was immediately difficult to find out about his life, right? Immediately. And scholars have remarked on this, that it was like the trail just went cold. It was like he had never lived at all, like very mysterious. His burial was in his hometown, and it was conducted with discretion, bordering on furtive discretion. And none of his descendants seem to have tried to keep his memory alive. That is a shame. He was certainly a gay man, and those were his circles, right? And at that time, not always fashionable and favorable, right? But what a thing to be this famous, like a celebrity, and upon your death, for even your family to turn their back on you. That is the most shameful thing of all. Daniela says people in Ireland believe in fairies. You know, I've been to Ireland and I've bought quite a few books on fairy lore, and it is a lot of fun to read up on that subject. That would be great material for working on rug projects. They have some great fairy stories in Ireland, the Little People, right? Beyond Darby O'Gill and the Little People, which is a movie that I love. They really do. They really do. So who's to say? Who's to say? The Cottingley fairies were cutouts from images in Princess Mary's gift book published in 1914 with added wit. That's right. They were like the equivalent of a Photoshop of the day. I forgot that. I have a book on this subject downstairs. How funny. Unfortunately, it wasn't. Yeah, I know. Just awful stories, awful times. I hope that we're learning from these awful times. Sometimes I wonder. All right, now where are we here? I think we're closer to this guy. Let me see what our next guy is. Ooh, John Duncan Ferguson, blonde with checkered sundress. Blonde with checkered sundress. Here we go. She's beautiful. She is beautiful. All of his work is beautiful. John Duncan Ferguson. He was born in Edinburgh, Scotland, the first of 4 children. He briefly trained as a naval surgeon, but he soon realized that his vocation was painting. And he enrolled at the Trustees Academy in Edinburgh, which was an art school. He rapidly became disenchanted with the rigid style of teaching, and he elected from that point on to teach himself to paint. So he dropped out of school. To this end, he began to travel to Morocco, Spain, France, right? What a life, where he became acquainted with all of the other artists from that time. Now, in 1898, Ferguson took his first trip to Paris to study at the Louvre. And at that point, right, because he went to some very exotic places, Morocco, Spain, France, but when he got into Paris, he began to become aware of Impressionist painters and paintings and became part of that world. Oh, Lynn, did you leave little things out for the fairies? Why not? I am not putting it down by any means. You know, if you know me, you know I'm super superstitious. The fairies just never crossed over into our family. Lots of other craziness, but not fairies. And I think it is adorable and quaint, and who knows and why not, right? Ferguson, later he'd also be influenced by Fauvism. So Impressionism and Fauvism, mostly principles of color, right? Strong use of color, very specific. André Denoyer wrote in his foreword, let me come away from here and come back to you. He wrote something beautiful of this artist. In his foreword to Ferguson's memorial exhibition in 1961, he wrote of the artist Ferguson, his art is a deep and pure expression of his immense love of life. Endowed with a rare plastic feeling, almost sculptural in quality, he joined with it an exceptional sense of color, outspoken, ringing colors, rich and splendid in their very substance. What a nice thing to say about somebody. Ferguson became part of an enormous growth in artistic talent in Paris at that time. And isn't this, I mean, this whole episode is about sort of enclaves, right? People whose other family members were super talents at the same time and being in the right place at the right time. I mean, it's all about groups and who's surrounding you. There has to be a book out there, not just on art, but also on literature and all sort of disciplines, talking about these great hornet's nests, hives of activity and talent and inspiration, because there have been so many and so many different areas of life and study over the years, right? This is just another one of them. So he's in Paris, and guess who his buddies are? He's mingling with Matisse, Picasso. He's part of cafe society, right? So he's one of them until the outbreak of World War I. So at that point, obviously art is not such a thing. It loses its momentum. That whole movement kind of peters out. And in the 1920s, he moves to London and settles there. And he founds a group called the New Art Club, which emerged as the New Scottish Group of Painters. That's what they were called, and he was their first president. In 1943, he published a book called Modern Scottish Painting, and on his death, his widow, whose name was Margaret Morris, presented 14 of his paintings to the University of Stirling, which was being founded at that time. So what a beautiful gift, right? Scottish artist with this much pull and sway and put this much of a mark on the art world to have, what did they say, 13, 14 of his original paintings just given to the university right there locally where they lived. Fantastic story, isn't it? But you know what my favorite part of that story is? I gotta hurry up. It's how he did not like the way that he was taught, and he decided to pull out of that, right? Homie don't want to play that game. He backs it right up and he starts to teach himself until he finds a group that supports the way that he feels, the way he wants to work, and his inspiration. And that's exactly what we should do, whether we are painters or rug hookers. If you're getting a teacher or you're being taught in a style and you think, this is not for me, it's too strict, I don't like the confines of this, instead of quitting, you just back it right up, and you figure out where your place is. And that's how you do it, baby, right? That's how they've done it since the beginning of time. All right. This is a clear one. Next call. Let's see. Next call is, oh, another favorite. Charles Wysocki, Nantucket Winds. Charles Wysocki. Let me bring Wysocki. Let me Wysocki to you. Oh, did you hear that? You didn't miss that, did you? That was one of my best jokes ever. Let me Wysocki to you. Charles Wysocki, Nantucket Winds. Now, this information is coming from the Artifacts, A-R-T-I, factsgallery.com. Born in 1928 in Detroit, Michigan, from the time he was a little tot, Wysocki always wanted to be an artist. His father was an immigrant from Poland who worked on an assembly line at the Ford Motor Company for over 35 years. His dad was not thrilled about him wanting to be an artist, right? Most of his encouragement came from his mom. Charles went to high school, a technical school, and then he became an apprentice at a Detroit art studio. And then Uncle Sam snatched him up. So he was drafted in 1950 during the Korean War, and he should have been sent to Korea, where God knows what his fate would have been. But the night before he was supposed to be sent out, he was granted a leave of absence to visit his brother, Harry, who had become very, very sick. And by the time he latched back up with the unit he was supposed to go to at that originally, they said, you're going to Germany. And he was stationed in Hanau in West Germany from 1951 to 1952. He fulfilled his 2-year obligation, no dirtiness, no messiness, and then he traded in his rifle for a paintbrush. And he met his future wife, Elizabeth, at an ad agency in Los Angeles. He just graduated from UCLA as an art major. They met, they fell in love at first sight. Elizabeth's family was one of the first to settle in the San Fernando Valley. Charles was enamored of the simplicity of farm life and the wholesome values. This influence is what started his whole primitive style that we know and love. Charles and Elizabeth were married 3 months after they met in 1960. During this time, they made several trips to the East Coast. They went antique shopping in Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, all over Cape Cod, Boston, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine. Charles painted his whole life right up into his death at the age of 73, 2002. He was surrounded by his family, and it was also his 42nd wedding anniversary. Beautiful story. Isn't that a beautiful story? Linda says, I wish I lived in Nantucket Winds. Oh, you're telling me this is my favorite Wysocki, but I love all of them. If there's, I mean, I can't choose for myself between Wysocki and Cahoon. It would be hard to choose, but I think I'm teetering on the edge of Wysocki just because he was so prolific and his scenes are so, you do want to live in every single one of them. I mean, they are just so impossibly charming. One more sip. I'm going to come right here. And our next call is, let's see, there it is. Sybil von Olfers, the Snow Children book. Sybil von Olfers. Let me bring that to you. I don't have a good rhyme for you that time. Sybil von Olfers is less easy to rhyme. So maybe you recognize this too. A lot of museum stores carry her work as calendars, day books, note cards, things like that. Her life is between 1881 and 1916. A German art teacher and nun. who worked for many, many years in illustration. She was real. Her life was very, very interesting too. I'm only going to give you a small part of it, but very interesting person to read up on. Very sheltered childhood that she enjoyed immensely with her brothers and sisters, education through governesses and private teachers. Her parents had a very cordial relationship with their numerous children. But Sybil was very sort of delicate, very smart, showed early on a passion for art and religion. And according to the notes of her grandmother, she had a soft face like a Madonna. But they called her the wild bumblebee in the family, right? Because she differed so much from the other kids and she had such a strong imagination. Because of her original ideas and her artistic talent, Sybil created a very happy and fulfilled life for her and her sister. They made picture books together, which she had written solely for her sister. They brought a lot of cheerfulness into their life, into their family, and they were published. During her childhood, she sometimes showed a silent, childish religiousness. This could especially be seen when she prayed in front of a self-erected altar surrounded by numerous candles and little Madonnas that she modeled herself, and she drew pictures of saints that she posted all over her. I mean, just a beautiful, sweet childhood. Later becomes a nun and an artist and an illustrator. And this is like this whole story is like a Snow Baby story, right? This is before Snow Babies, like the little statues, but this will certainly be the forerunner to the look of the Snow Babies. This is a very famous illustration, very famous book, and indeed she is a very famous person. So Sybil von Olfers, O-L-F-E-R-S. Next call. Okay, I'm going to come over here. This one looks pretty close. So that will be, let's see. I got some goodies left. Oop, here we go. That is Marie Laurence, and the piece is called Musique. Marie Laurence. She is fantastic. Let's come to Marie Laurence. This is the image. She is French. Laurence's work, now I have 2 entries for her. So I'm going to start with a bio one, right? And then hopefully we pull the other one up later and we read that. She was born in Paris, where she was raised by her mother and lived much of her life in Paris. At the age of 18, she studied porcelain painting, and she continued her art education until she changed her mind and decided to focus on oil painting. During the early years of the 20th century, she was a very important figure in the Parisian avant-garde movement. She was a member of the circle, again, Pablo Picasso's circle, the Cubists, right? She became romantically involved with the poet Guillaume Apollinaire, and she is considered to be his romantic muse, right? So can't confirm that, but it sounds right. She was a beautiful woman. During the First World War, Laurence left France for exile in Spain with her German-born husband, Baron Otto von Wattien, since, because of her marriage to him, she automatically lost her French citizenship. The couple subsequently lived together briefly in Dusseldorf. She was greatly affected and saddened by her separation from Paris. And, artistic center of the world at that point. She divorced her husband in 1920 and returned to Paris, where she was extremely financially successful as an artist until the economic depression, right, 1929, for them, early 1930s. And at that point in the 1930s, she begins work as a teacher at a private school, and she will live in Paris and work as a teacher until her death. We will continue talking about her story when I call the second painting of hers, right? So, to be continued. There's only a couple people who I used 2 of their works because I thought they were so extraordinary. I couldn't choose just one. So, next call. Sorry, Buttons is out there barking. I should have shut the window. Sigrid Hurchan. H-J-E-R-T-E-N. Sigrid Hurchan. This piece is called Biography. So let me bring this to you. If Buttons can't shut his little trap, I might shut that door. We'll see what happens. This is such an interesting story, too. It's not a happy one. So, spoiler alert, if you're not good with emotional stuff, this is not going to be a good story for you. I'm just going to shut that window, or else I'm going to have to throw a shoe down on him. The animal. Animals and kids. Who said that? This famous person said, kids and animal. Okay. Sigrid Hurchan, Swedish modernist painter, born 1885, studied at the University College of Arts, Crafts, and Designs in Stockholm, graduated as a drawing teacher. At a studio party in 1909, Hurchan met her future husband, 20-year-old Isaac Grunewald, who had already studied 1 year with Henri Matisse in Paris. Grunewald convinced her that she would do the best for herself as a painter if she also studied with Matisse. So later that year, she went to art school under Matisse, studied directly with him, and she is said to have been his best pupil because of her fine sense of color, right? As Hurchan studied under Henri Matisse in Paris, she was impressed by the way both he and his good friend Paul Cézanne dealt with color. Right? This is so new at this time. We take for granted pictures that look like this. They were completely new at that time. Between 1920 and 1932, Hurchan and her family lived in Paris. They made many excursions to the French countryside and the Italian Riviera for painting. Her husband often visited Stockholm, where he had a brilliant career going. In the late, here it turns, in the late 1920s, Hurchan increasingly, I'm going to say Sigrid, she had various psychosomatic ailments, and she complained often of loneliness. So let me pull away from here and come back to you. This is color-wise, this is a stunning painting. Everything about it is stunning. So psychosomatic ailments, as time passed, an increasing tension can be seen in her art. This is one to look at if you're interested. In the late 1920s, while she was feeling very isolated in France, right, her husband is away a lot, colder and darker colors began to appear in her paintings. Recurring diagonal strokes helped to give the paintings a tense impression. In 1932, Hurchan decided to return to Stockholm, but during packing, she collapsed. She got to Sweden and was temporarily taken into a psychiatric hospital with symptoms of schizophrenia. She recovered periodically, and in the following 2 years, which is 1932 to 1934, her artistry sort of culminated. It was her peak. It was a crescendo, right? This is her time. She was like a possessed person, just painting every single day. She was making pictures, a picture a day that expressed her life, right? And these are important to her storyline. This is all documented well on the internet. Menacing tones, growing storm clouds, feelings of abandonment. She worked all these kinds of themes into her work. Some of her paintings radiate horror, while others give a warm and harmonious sort of impression, like the one we just looked at. I didn't choose a horror one for tonight. Among other things, her paintings were called, not very complimentary, idiocy, humbug, horrors, and products of a handicap. Not very complimentary. So she finally won in 1936, just a couple years later, public recognition when she received a solo exhibition at the Royal Swedish Academy of Arts in Stockholm. It's not a happy story. After viewing the nearly 500 works in her 1936 retrospective, the critics were unanimous. The exhibition was hailed as one of the most remarkable of the season, and Hurchan was honored as one of Sweden's greatest and most original modern artists of all time. Thus, she regained recognition, but it was too late, because in the meantime, between those breakdowns in this exhibition in Stockholm, her husband Isaac, who had constantly had other mistresses, had left her, divorced her, and both he and his new wife died in an airplane crash. And she herself was fully diagnosed with schizophrenia and was being permanently hospitalized, where she remained in a psychiatric ward for the rest of her life. And after 1938, her artistic output dwindled, followed by a botched lobotomy. She died in Stockholm in 1948. So, I mean, what can one say? I mean, this is a horrific story, but beautiful work, definitely worth. Are you sure you have bingo, Daniela? I'm sorry, Daniela, I forgot to tell you the most important thing. It's blackout. I'm so sorry. How did I forget that? I should have. So with these cards, because it comes too fast, you have to get all the calls on the card. I'm looking at the wheel going, it's too early for bingo because it's usually 3 calls before that we get bingo. You need to mark off everything at the I'm so sorry, Daniela. You're so excited too. I'm so sorry. I should have mentioned that. That's the important thing. You have to get all of your marks off, not just like a straight line. We used to play with like the original card, and it had a lot more calls, and it was possible to do bingo with that. But with the card of 16, it's hard. It's hard to get it right. So I'm going to keep an eye on that. But I think at this moment, it's impossible yet to have bingo. You need a full card. No, no problem. It's not. It's not you. It's me. I should have told you that. That is the most important part. Total blackout. But you might yet win. All right. I think the closest call is going to be this one. And who is that? Who is that? Oh, it's Louis Wain. This is a terribly sad movie. We're not going to go heavy into it. But have you seen this movie about Louis Wain? Who's that guy? Cumberbatch. Sebastian? What's his name? Something Cumberbatch, right? Played Sherlock Holmes, modern Sherlock Holmes. He plays Louis Wain in a new movie, which I could not get through. I was not emotionally prepared, and I could not get through it. But maybe you can. You probably are stronger than me. This call is Louis Wain, Cats Relaxing in the Grounds of Knapsbury. I have 2 Louis Wain calls, so let's make sure that you mark the right one off. This is the right one. Daniela, that painting was so interesting. And it was so light, right? The last painting, knowing what her life was like. So Louis Wain, Cats Relaxing in the Grounds of Knapsbury. A little bit on Louis Wain, because again, we have a second picture of his to look at. How amazing is, how adorable. If you are interested in this, you must see this movie. I forget what it's called, but it's by that, it's Cumberbatch plays Louis Wain. He was Louis Wain, actual Louis Wain, born 1860. His father was a traveler for a textile firm. His mother was a French sort of descendant, designed church embroideries and carpets. That's interesting for us. He studied in London at the School of Art and began his career as an art journalist, drawing many different subjects. However, it was for his pictures of cats that he eventually became famous. From the 1880s until the outbreak of the First World War, the Louis Wain cat was hugely popular, appearing in vast quantities in prints, books, magazines, cards, calendars, annuals, everything. His cats were found everywhere, engaging in sort of every kind of human funny activity, from playing cricket, digging up roads, construction work, bicycles, parading the latest fashions, appearing at Ascot, everything you can think of. And despite his fame, sadly, he never made much money. This is described in the movie. He made some bad calls. He made some bad slips with not having signed and copyrighted things. He was highly impractical, extremely eccentric, and really bad with money matters. So he actually suffered real poverty despite being an absolute celebrity. Always known for being somewhat eccentric, he began to develop signs of serious mental disorder. And I have to say, watching the movie, Benedict, that's it, Cumberbatch plays Louis Wain, fantastic. He loses his wife, right? And that is going to be a mental turning point. So he does start showing signs of serious mental illness. Previously a mild and gentle man, he became increasingly suspicious, abusive, occasionally violent towards his sisters who he lived with. Eventually, in June of 1924, he was certified insane and committed to the Springfield Hospital at Tooting, the town of Tooting. Discovered here the following year, he was transferred to the Bethlehem Hospital after a campaign of admirers of his work, including the Prime Minister, Ramsay MacDonald, later arranged for the Wain sisters to receive a small civil list pension in recognition of their brother's services, right? So it's amazing that the Prime Minister stepped in to make money right for the family. It was a little too late for Wain himself. 1930, he was transferred to Knapsbury Hospital near St. Albans. Has anybody been to St. Albans? It is such a beautiful, beautiful old town. Big war history, but beautiful. This is that place, his last place that he lived, the sort of hospital, right? This is Knapsbury. So he was transferred to Knapsbury Hospital near St. Albans. He continued drawing until the end of his life, and exhibitions of his work were held in London in 1931 and 1937, as well as a memorial exhibition shortly after his death, which was in 1939. So again, we have another, oh, thank you, Daniela. We have another, let me close this, picture of Wain's, well, it will come up because I cover everything even the ones after Bingo. So I have more on him. But great story. Heartbreaking movie. That's a hard one. 1, 2, 3. I think I'm going to come here. And that brings us to, let's see. Okay. Oh, Jessie Wilcox Smith. You are going to love this one. Jessie Wilcox Smith. This piece is called Little Lame Prince. So let me bring you Little Lame Prince. We don't really call things by these kinds of names anymore. It's a little bit insensitive. Here's the Little Lame Prince. Isn't he lovely? The Electrical Life of Louis Wain. Thank you so much. It is a beautiful movie, but it is dark. Make sure emotionally you're set up for it, right? So this piece, Little Lame Prince, this is a long entry, but you're going to love it. It's worth knowing who she is. Jessie Wilcox Smith, 1863 to 1935, an American illustrator during the golden age of illustration, considered one of the greatest pure illustrators of all time. She was a contributor to books and magazines during the late 19th and early 20th century, illustrated stories and articles for clients like Century, Collier's, Leslie's Weekly, Harper's, McClure's, Scribner's, Ladies' Home Journal, Good Housekeeping, ongoing relationship with Good Housekeeping, which included her long-running Mother Goose series of illustrations, right, for Good Housekeeping. She did the covers for Good Housekeeping from December 1917 to 1933, right? Among more than 60 books that she illustrated, including Louise May Alcott's Little Women, An Old-Fashioned Girl, and Longfellow's Evangeline, Robert Louis Stevenson's Child's Garden of Verses. She was born in 1863 in the Mount Airy neighborhood of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. She was the youngest girl born to an investment banker. She attended private elementary schools, and at the age of 16, she was sent to Cincinnati, Ohio to live with her cousins to finish her education. She trained to be a teacher and taught kindergarten, but she found that the physical demands of working with children were too strenuous for her, the constant sort of back problems of bending down. She had some physical sort of limitations. So she was persuaded to attend one of her friends' or cousins' art classes, and she realized that night that she had a talent for drawing. You wonder how these things began, right? I'm going to come back to you. Don't all of these stories have an amazing turning point where it's like, that's the moment. That's the moment where things turned and this person's life went in a different direction. 1884 or 1885, unknown, she attended the Philadelphia School of Design for Women, which is now called Moore College of Art and Design. And then she attended the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts in Philadelphia. She began to use photography as a resource for her illustrations, right? Very detailed. And the reason she did that was because at this time, even if women were allowed to go to art colleges, it was not considered ladylike for them to participate in live life drawing classes. So without being able to do live drawing, she could not get that realism. And with the advent of photography and the access to photography, she was able to work in a very photographic and realistic style, which was the style that sold at that time. If she had to rely on her art training, she would not have been able to do it because she did not have access to the same classes that men had, right? Karen says, my all-time favorite child story. Every Christmas I read this to my kids. Oh, how nice is that? Is it called The Little Lame Prince, the book itself? Barbara says, loving the stories of the artists and their art. Me too. Me too. So she begins to use photography. This is a really big deal. She graduates from Pennsylvania Fine Arts in June of 1888. And that same year, she's hired by Ladies' Home Journal for an entry-level position. She will rise. During her time at Ladies' Home Journal, she enrolls in classes taught by the great artist Howard Pyle. He keeps coming up, right? He is the kingpin of illustration at this time at Drexel Institute, which is now Drexel University. She was in his first ever class, which was almost 50% females. Pyle pushed many artists of Smith's generation to fight for their right to illustrate for the major publishing houses. He worked especially closely with many artists who he found to be gifted, like Jessie. Smith would write a speech stating that working with Pyle swept away all of the cobwebs and confusions that so beset the path of the art student. So this is a moment in time, right? While studying at Drexel, I'm going to say Jessie instead of Smith, met Elizabeth Shippen Green and Violet Oakley, both very famous illustrators too, who had the same talent, the same interests. They developed a close, lifelong friendship, all three of them. The women shared a studio on Philadelphia's Chestnut Street. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's Evangeline, illustrated by Oakley and Smith, so two of them together illustrating it, was published in 1897. Their teacher, Howard Pyle, helped to secure this first commission for them. So he got them that first job. He was one of those great people who pushed them toward the world and toward opportunities. At the turn of the century, her career was flourishing. As educational opportunity opened up for women in the later 19th century, women artists joined professional enterprises, and they also founded their own art associations because they had to. But artwork by lady artists was considered inferior. To help overcome that stereotype, women became increasingly vocal and confident in promoting their own work. As part of the emerging image of the educated, modern, and freer new woman, right? This is a phrase, new woman, right? It's a phrase. So that is something to study, to look up. That is a great moment in sort of feminist history, the idea of the new woman. And it's somebody like Jessie Wilcox who pushes that idea right to the center of the world in people's faces. Artists played a crucial role in representing the new women in drawing images of the icon and exemplifying this emerging type in their own lives. In the late 19th century and early 20th century, almost 90% of subscribers to magazines were women, but men were doing all the art, right? And this is the point that is changing. So more and more these big magazines are hiring women because they know that their clientele is women. Women are going to do work that maybe appeals more to women, but has little nuances in it that women will identify with because they have a separate and parallel world to men. They do not share the same world. As more women entered the artistic community, publishers hired more women to do illustrations and depict their perspectives. According to an article printed by the New York Times in 1910, Smith made about $12,000 a year. In today's money, that's $350,000 every year. She was super successful. Like Norman Rockwell, she was a huge media star. She was famous, right? And sad ending. Although she was never a traveler, she did not like travel. She was talked into traveling in 1933 to Europe, where she became very, very sick. Her health immediately deteriorated. She came back home and, like, within a year, died in her bed at the age of 71. So I'm not making light of it or making a joke at all, but I'm saying she was probably saying to her friends at that point, I told you I did not want to take that trip. Now, I have to show you that picture that I accidentally showed you at the beginning because it is, you know, I'm not a great feminist, right? I'm a great one for free meals and opening doors, but this picture really speaks to me. I bet it will speak to you too. This is Jessie Wilcox Smith. Like, let's do cheers, my dears, to this picture. Let's all do it together at the same time. Cheers. On the two women who are facing us, the one on the right is Jessie Wilcox Smith, and the one on the left is Violet Oakley, right? So the two of them together did Evangeline, illustrated Evangeline. Thank you, Daniela. This is a fun night for us. It's so nice to join live. Sally says, once again, I did not receive my notification, even though I clicked set reminder. Oh no, put it into your phone or something. Put it into your phone. This is the best part though, Sally. You're catching the best part. I'm going to do cheers one more time. We're going to do it for Sally. Sorry about that. I don't know what YouTube does. I have no idea. But again, technology is sometimes great and sometimes aggravating. Isn't this a beautiful moment in time? These four women, right? At least three of them are the ones that we were just talking about. And there's a fourth friend here. Fighting for their rights, fighting for their jobs. I mean, isn't this fantastic? Cheers, Sally. Cheers, everybody. And I just want to point out, I'm going to spin the wheel again because I know it's getting late. The first image that we did tonight, the N.C. Wyeth, do you remember Laundry Day, right? Laundry Day in Maine. It was a beautiful illustration of a woman bent over, right? All of those beautiful colors in the bay or the ocean in the distance, the laundry line, and she's in the laundry bin doing her washing. That's an N.C. Wyeth illustration. But that is the same moment of the Jessie Wilcox Smith, of all of these women, of many of the illustrators we're talking about tonight. And I'm just bringing that up again because that painting, Washing Day, is a rare example of a man covering something that would happen in a woman's world, a laundry day, right? So that's just where illustration was for magazines in these days. With almost 90% women subscribers, you had to appeal to that audience or you were going to lose the women subscribers. Newspapers were for men, magazines were for women. Right? That's in generalization, but you know what I mean. Cheers. Bourbon. Oh, I love bourbon. Is it Maker's Mark? All right, we're getting there. And just so you know, even when we get bingo, you know I'm going to finish, and I know a lot of you will log off because it gets late, but even when somebody gets bingo for the whole blackout card, I will continue with the show because I'm not going to use images and not tell you who the artist was or do the commentary for them because that's just not fair to the artist. So, all right, next call is going to be Pseudo Shigeru, and this is called First News. So let me come to you here. First News. This is the piece by Pseudo Shigeru. And I have to tell you, Pseudo is one of the hardest people in the world to research. I really could not get anywhere. This is such a beautiful piece. Her life seems to have was started around 1850. It seems like she died at around 1899. At least that's what it says on the internet. Although I do wonder, because to me, this looks much more in the style of like a little bit 20, 30 years later. I don't know. I found it impossible to, this is a male, right? Pseudo Shigeru. Again, this piece is called First News. There is, the last name is Shiguru. First name Pseudo, Sudo. Beautiful pieces of work on the internet, but no biographical leads whatsoever. Absolutely none. But isn't this a stunning piece? And if you are interested in this moment of illustration, you see the beautiful screen behind. They're working on sewing something, so I thought that would be really appealing for us tonight. Just a beautiful moment in women's lives, but no biographical information. So if you have this great Pseudo Shigeru First News, beautiful piece, if anybody finds anything out about Pseudo, I would love to know because it was hard. I tried quite hard. I also love the Japanese style. It is so beautiful. And it's not the woodcut style. It's not like the loose paintbrush style. It's an illustration. It's a proper illustration. So it's so curious to me that this artist did so many illustrations and there's just nothing to be found on this artist. All right, this must be this one. We are getting there. We are getting there, folks. Next call. Let's see. It's on my last page. Let's see who we got. Paul Cleese, Magic Fish. Paul Cleese, Magic Fish. Let's see. So let's look at this piece right here. Paul Cleese, very well-known and recognizable artist. I just love this piece, and I loved the name Magic Fish at the beginning of the summer. 1879 to 1940, Swiss-born German artist Paul Klee, K-L-E-E. We will certainly be covering him soon, probably next in the Design Like series that we do. Highly individual style, influenced by many movements in art, including Expressionism, including Cubism and Surrealism. Klee was a natural draftsman who experimented and eventually deeply explored color theory, wrote extensively about color theory. So besides being a wonderful artist, fine artist in his own right, he did so much for the art world with his writing, right? If you're studying art, a student of art, his theory is as important to modern art as, for example, Da Vinci's is to the Renaissance, right? So, I mean, he is a very, very important player, very knowledgeable. His colleague and friend, painter Vasily Kandinsky, also a famous name, they both taught at the Bauhaus School, right? You've probably heard the word Bauhaus before, whole style in and of itself, design and architecture school in Germany. And his work, Klee's work, really reflects his very dry humor and his sometimes childlike perspective, his personal moods, his beliefs, a lot of symbolism, a lot of musicality. He was also a musician. Very, very interesting work. And I saw Kaz said, I can read about him in Japanese. Kaz, you know what? I was going to say that, but I didn't want to put you on the spot. If you could That would be amazing. I would like to hear more about Pseudo, because then we can look at some of his other work and talk about him in more detail. It is so beautiful, and he does cover a lot of, let me come back to you, female situations, women sewing, women doing domestic chores, and I think it would really appeal to us. So if you could, and if you find something out in Japanese, that would be extremely helpful, because that's really where it is. It's not there in English. So that would be at your leisure, no pressure. That would be super helpful. The first name listed in Japanese is the last name. Okay. Last name, first name. Okay, I see. Yeah. Oh dear. And Sue says, oh, I'm good to see we are still fighting for our rights. Absolutely. Are we ever going to make as much as men in our lifetime? Doubt it. Not to be negative, but doubt it. All right. So let's come here. And next call, I'm looking out for bingo just in case. Cornel Guillaume Beverloo, right? This is a tough one. I think this is a Dutch. Yes, this is a Dutch artist. Cornel Guillaume Cornelius van Beverloo. So let me show you the picture here and scratch it off. If you have this, you're getting ever closer. You would do a rug in that style, right? Absolutely. In the clay, and you mean in the clay style? So good for rug making. Yeah, the next design light class will be him. This current one I'm working on, Chagall. He's very, I'm not going to say similar to clay, but he's sort of contemporaries of each other in some parallels and similarities. Both really conducive to rug making design. Really, really exciting and whimsical. Like this piece. This artist, Dutch artist, Cornel, so that's Corneille. And that's how he's known in Dutch, just as Cornel. He was born 1922, died 2010. He was born in Liège, Belgium. Although his parents were Dutch and they moved back to the Netherlands from Belgium when he was 12, and he studied at the Academy of Art in Amsterdam. He was one of the founders of the Reflex, da-da-da, the Reflex, da-da. Remember that Duran Duran song? I had to do it. Flap, 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 flex. I'm stopping. I'm sorry. The Reflex movement in 1948, 1949. He was also one of the founders of have you heard of the Cobra Movement? It had a great influence on Scandinavian art. The Cobra Movement was a European avant-garde movement that was like 1948 to 1951, right after the Second World War. And the name was coined in 1948 from the initials of the members of the home countries of the group. So, for example, I'm not going to say all the names because it'll take forever, but their home countries were Copenhagen, which is the CO, Brussels, which is the BR, and Amsterdam, right, which is the city, not the country, but okay. These are all cities, not countries. So COBRA makes Cobra. Isn't that interesting that that's how they name themselves? He was an active, Beverloo was an active member of the group from the beginning, not only in painting, but he also published poetry in the Cobra magazine, right? I'm going to come back to you. So different. I really love that piece. In 1951, he's most inspired by the drawings of children. And he believed that the importance of looking at children's art was in connecting their experiences to like the real world. He believed that they were so young, so early, so close to secrets and mysteries that the knowledge and information that they carried was like magical and important to connect to life. And I think that's a beautiful idea. In 1951, he moved to Paris and he began collecting African art. So, the huge collector, these artifacts became evident in his work, like the still life we just saw, which began to take on a more imaginative style, like his landscapes, often seen like bird's eye view, God's view, exotic birds, and everything stylized. Until his death, Cornel van Beverloo lived and worked in Paris, and he made visits to Israel, where he would work, collect, study. So very high art circles, right? But interesting artist, and one that even somebody who was born in the Netherlands and lived in the Netherlands for a long time had never heard of. So interesting. Another name for us. Was Daniela. That one is so pretty. All of these people, if you end up watching back and pulling some of these names out, or if they're on your cards, these artists are all fantastic. I had so much trouble weeding out the others that I'll save for in a few months. We'll do another episode like this on fine art rather than rugs. But I had such a hard time choosing which ones I was going to use because I cut like half of them. I just could not decide. I wanted to give you a nice cross section, and it was hard. They are all stellar. This next call is the other one by Marie Laurence called The Visit. So let me show you what this looks like. And we looked at her first one. Now we're looking at the second one. So I'll finish her biography here with this image. This is much more in her style. So Marie Laurence, this one is called The Visit. And carrying on, we talked about how, she was friends with Pablo Picasso. She was Apolliniere's sort of mistress, or I should say muse. I'm going to do a different bit of commentary now, so I'm not repetitive. Her work includes paintings, watercolors, drawings, and prints. She is known as one of the only female Cubist painters. Now, that's not super clear with this particular piece, but you can see how her work is very angular, graphic, geometric, and does certainly have a hint, a whisper at least, of Cubism, right? While her work shows the influence of Cubist painters like Picasso and George Braque, she was very good friends with George Braque, she developed her own unique style to abstract, which often centered on the representation of female groups, women, animals, right? Subjects that were more interesting for her. Her work lies outside the bounds of Cubist norms in her pursuit of a specifically feminine aesthetic by her use of pastel colors, right, with Cubist forms. Real specific. The muted colors and the geometric patterns inherited from Cubism were replaced by light tones and undulating compositions. Her signature motifs are these willowy, sort of ethereal women figures and this palette of soft pastel colors. She has this kind of enchanted world that is all her own. You cannot mistake her for another Cubist painter, certainly, right? And she was a celebrity in her day. She was right in that hornet's nest of artists, of important artists. It was, we don't talk about female Cubist painters. Well, Marie Laurence, she's the one. I love it too, Daniela. All right, we are getting dangerously close now. Let's see who this is. Da-da-da-da. And again, when I'm done, even after I'm done, I'm going to finish the last calls after we even know who the winning card is. Harold Anderson. Harold Anderson. So let's come to Harold Anderson and look at this is a beautiful piece. Not quite in focus. This is the best I could get. Harold Anderson, 1894 to 1973, an American artist and illustrator. Another person who is very, very hard to research. Anderson studied at the Fenway Art School in Boston, was in his lifetime, one of the country's most well-known, very, very famous and respected character artists. He was recognized for his assistance to younger artists and illustrators. So he was one of these kind, forthcoming people who helped further other people's career, right? So happily and willingly. He resided in the Manhattan suburb of New Rochelle, although he sometimes lived in Old Greenwich, Connecticut. But New Rochelle, like Old Greenwich, artist communities, colonies in those days, were top illustrators like Harold Anderson, like Leidendecker, like Rockwell. These guys lived like near each other in these, again, hives of talent, right, outside of the cities. So he was very famous in his day. He's not as famous now, and he's not a lot of biographical information on Harold Anderson, but I think this is an absolutely beautiful, very illustration-driven story picture, right? This beautiful sort of probably beauty queen of the fair giving the prize to the top cow or heifer or whatever they would call him. But absolutely beautiful. We are getting there. Let me know when you have it. Oh, that's an easy call. We're right here. Gosh, the others are all down there. Oh, it's getting tense, isn't it? All right, let's see. Next call, Kate Greenway. Greenway, yep. Kate Greenway, of course. 6 young women. So let's look at this together. 6 young women. I'm looking at the thread too, just in case anyone calls out. I'm hoping we don't have the same situation we had last time we played bingo, where nobody who had the winning card was on. We're going to have to be careful of that this time. This call is Kate Greenway, 1846 to 1901, an English Victorian artist and writer known for her children's books and illustrations. She received her education in graphic design between 1858 and 1871. She's the second daughter of John Greenway, who was a draftsman and engraver. No surprise that she became an artist. Her mother was a seamstress and a milliner who opened a shop in Islington when her husband's business sort of waned. Smart, right? These are practical people. Kate's earliest artistic desires found their expression in drawing and in dressing up her dolls. A strong bond existed between her and her father. He nicknamed her Knocker, right? This doesn't sound quite right, but wait for it. Because when she, this is so awful, because when she was crying, her face looked like a door knocker. So her dad called her Knocker. I mean, when you picture these old, like, grotesque, like, gargoyle, like, door knockers from this era, it's just funny that dad would like, nickname his favorite daughter Knocker for this reason. So she began her career designing for the, at that time, burgeoning holiday card market, producing, seasonal things, Christmas and Valentine cards. In 1879, woodblock engraver and printer Edmund Evans printed Under the Willow, which was an instant bestseller. And she illustrated it. So that really established her. That was her. You wonder how these things began. And her success continued right through the 1880s, 1890s. Her depiction of children in imaginary 18th century costumes. So these costumes are like older, right? She's born in 1846, but this is the Jane Austen era of costume, right? So these costumes are even older. This is like the Napoleonic costume. Napoleon and Josephine, more like the 1820s Jane Austen. So it looks like, it's the costume of her day, but it's not. This is very nostalgic for her when she's living. This would have appealed to older people who are like, I remember being a girl and dressing like that. So she's depicting 18th century costumes right through the sort of Queen Anne style. And the costumes are a really big deal. I know it's funny, Linda, isn't it? Were a really big deal. Part of the reason that her style became so popular. Such a prolific artist, Kate Greenway. Such a famous artist and copyright free, right? So if you like her work, copyright free. So I think this might be it. Let's see. I'm getting nervous because if this isn't it, we're having our situation that we had last time. So this call is Kawahara Kiga, Catalog of Animals. Let's see. I'm getting nervous. I don't know why, just because of last time. Let's see what we got. This is the image, a little bit out of focus again. The images are what they are. I can't do any better with them if that's the way they're loaded. So, again, Kawahara Kiga, Catalog of Animals, 1786 to 1860. This is a Japanese painter of the Edo period, painter of plants, fishes, birds, reptiles, crustaceans, social scenes, landscapes. His works, famous artist, right? K-E-I-G-A, Kiga. Kaz, I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. I'm sorry. His works can be found in museums in Japan. About 100 of his works are in Japan. Also in the Netherlands, about 1,000 of his works are in the Netherlands and a lot of other places. But Kaz, no pressure, same problem. It's hard for me to research this artist. I just found it exceptional that this artist worked in the, well, probably not late 18th century, but the very early 19th century. So right at the beginning of the 1800s. I mean, it's just so contemporary looking at these animals dressed up in clothing, right? It's so whimsical. You think, oh, this is probably 1920s. Well, it might even be earlier than 1820s. Very hard to research this artist, but I thought really, really interesting. I am going to say, well, let me come out of this picture. I have only 2 calls left. So I am a little bit worried that whoever has the winning card either cannot comment and is freaking out right now. That happened last time. Or is not there, right? Not everybody is live with us. Let's just take a moment to review what we have called. We called, let me look at what we've not called real quick. Take a sip of your drink. 1, 2, 3. No, there's a few that we haven't called. 3. Hang on. Let's see. I'm just organizing my notes and getting nervous. I was hoping somebody would write bingo there. No, we have 3. Yikes. Wait a minute. All right. Hang on. Let me catch up with you. These we did. These we did. Okay, now we have another one. That's 4. Okay, I think we're good. I think we're good. I'm a bit, you know, it was so stressful last time when we didn't know live which one it was, and then I had to send something in the morning to let you know that there was a legitimate problem and nobody was live that knew. So, spin the wheel. Let's do this thing. Kaz says you'll look into it. It's natural during the Edo period. Only Western trade was done with Dutch. Interesting. I feel like I should know that, and I don't. Linda Ann says my card still needs 5. Okay, so that might not be good, but there are still quite a few calls. All right, so let me see. Let me come down here. Something just fell over my head, one of my rag rugs. This is the other Louis Wain. So let's see. Let me bring you down here. All right, hang on. 3 should do it for sure. All right. The other Louis Wain. Get ready for some more cat action. This is the one I used for the thumbnail. Isn't this just too much? Oh, you know what? I think I did all of the commentary on Wain last time. I did. So this is the call. Louis Wain, Master of Car College. C-A-R College. 2 cards that each need 4. Okay, Carol. That sounds good. Master of Car College. Too cute, right? I mean, this is just so great. Isn't it amazing that this is like a Victorian artist? I didn't watch the end of the movie, as you know, and I'm just so curious. I guess I will have to watch it when I'm better prepared, but I'm just so curious about how, I mean, I know how because I watched the beginning, he got involved in doing cats, but isn't it a curious thing that there was such a huge public for doing cats? I mean, is that strange? I mean, it just seems strange to me that people would be this cat crazy. I remember in the movie, there was a scene where he was asked to judge like a cat contest, like a breed, like a dog show, but a cat show, right? He was asked to judge it just because he'd illustrated so many cats. I mean, it's just, yeah, I mean, he was really the cat man. There was a huge market for it. So let's see what we got next. 2 more. See, Daniela, you are still ahead of the game here. All right. 29. Wait a minute. Let me see who that is. And, oh, wait a minute. It fell on the floor. Oh, Deanna. Wait a minute. Yeah, there we go. All right. Edward Munch. Right? Is that going to do anything for you? Edvard Munch, The Dance of Life, 1863 to 1944, Norwegian painter. Do we still have, no, you do not have to be live to win. Not at all. Not at all. That's why I want to be sure that somebody says bingo, and I'm hoping it will be the first bingo, truly. So I'm just going to say as a sort of a disclaimer, it could be that after we, Karen, you sent me a message. I'll read it in a minute. It could be that after we do the show, we find out that a card won before, but let's hope that doesn't happen this time because that's always confusing. Edvard Munch is how it's pronounced. The Dance of Life. Let me change my face. Wait a minute. Come over here. And you want to see Munch. You don't want to see my face. Let's come here and do this. This is the image. So his childhood was overshadowed by illness, bereavement, and the dread of inheriting a mental condition that ran in his family. Studying at the Royal School of Art and Design in Christiania, which is today's Oslo, sorry, not a town anymore, Munch began to live a very bohemian life, painting his own emotional and psychological state. And these were called soul paintings at the time. From this soul painting moment in time, right, his style emerged, his distinctive style. Now, what painting, I know you know, is Munch best known for? Right, I'll pause for just a second because I know that you know. It's a very famous painting, and it doesn't look completely, really unlike this painting. So I'm going to wait because I know you're going to say it. He traveled quite a bit and brought him a lot of new inspiration. He went to Paris, spent some time with Gauguin, Van Gogh, Toulouse-Lautrec, looked at their use of color, changed everything. His famous painting, and I know you've already guessed it and wrote it, is called The Scream, right? His most famous. He said that he conceived of that painting one day, I'm going to come back to you, when he walked outside. You wonder how these things began. He walked outside at sunset and he, quote, heard the enormous, infinite scream of nature. The painting's agonized face in the scream, right, is widely identified with the angst of the modern person. As his fame and wealth grew, his emotional state remained insecure. And he briefly considered marriage, but he decided that he could not make a commitment. A mental breakdown in 1908 forced him to give up his heavy drinking. But he was cheered by his increasing acceptance and exposure in museums and galleries. That was a positive in his life. And in his later years, he spent time working in privacy, peace, quiet privacy, away from the noise, right, outside. Although his works were banned in Nazi-occupied Europe, most of them survived World War II, right? So that's amazing because most artists who were banned, they lost a lot of their work during that period. And because his works survived, his legacy survived, right? So that's fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Similar. Most of his work does not look like the Scream. It's really pretty, like the image that we were just looking at. The Scream is something else, right? All right. So let's see. We're coming here. All right. Let us see. All right. So this one is going to be. There are a ton of cat people. I guess that has not changed, right? This is our next call. This is Eric Tournaire, the Blue Lion. Eric Tournaire was born in 1958 in Africa, Casablanca, in Africa. Okay, in Casablanca, Morocco. He painted, so this is like a more contemporary artist. He painted as an assistant of Claude Morin for 10 years, building his sort of iconography on African inspiration. He lived and painted in Pennes, P-E-N-N-E-S, Mirabeau, still developing his particular universe. And he writes of himself, Africa, the cradle of humanity, is one of my sources of inspiration, most intense in the paintings of the northern Côte d'Ivoire, the Ivory Coast, the magic of nature at large. Okay, Linda, I'm coming right back. I see you. The magic of nature at large with his powers and cosmogonies, primitive touch. Okay, it's like the cosmos, primitive touch him a lot. In my paintings, I try to refer to all of these civilizations that succeeded and mixed into a crucible of the history of this continent. By overlay patterns, colors, and transparencies, I try to express a succession of images, legends, religious, and myths together closely in a space inside my paintings and drawings. To obtain a summary of these overlays, I use different techniques with each other. So I see there's bingo on card number 4. This artist is Eric Tournaire. So he is a living African artist, right? And you can look him up. There are a lot of his works online. He did a lot of beautiful, beautiful work. I want to say congratulations. It looks like it's card number 4. I will confirm that after the show, but it certainly looks like it's card number 4 tonight. Blue Lion for the win. That sounds so funny. It sounds like the Kentucky Derby again, doesn't it, Catherine? Congratulations to card number 4. So those of you who did not win tonight, it's going to be next time for sure, isn't it? A huge congratulations to the winners. And I think I have a few calls left, so I'm gonna carry out the last calls. If you are still drinking and eating, enjoying, I'm going to follow through with that. If you are leaving me here, I will say it was a wonderful night. It was great to be with you. Happy weekend. I will be in person on Sunday at Madison Wool to teach Amish toothbrush, and you know I'll be back for you on Monday with coffee time at noon Eastern Standard Time. In the meantime, congrats to the winners. And I want to cover a few more pieces like this one. This is one that was not called. These are not calls. We are post-show, post-winner. Blue Lion for bingo. Card number 4, from what it looks like, was the winner. So Annie, Mom, Linda, and I'm sure there are other card number 4s. You will certainly get an email tonight, right, to let you know how the loot divided up. Yes, Daniela, multiple people do win. So the win is usually, no matter how many, because we play with 12 cards, the way that the mathematics work is when no matter how many cards we play, the winner usually wins around, I'm not saying this for sure because I haven't calculated, but usually wins around 32 to 35, sometimes $37. Probably not tonight because it wasn't a great sales night for cards. But yeah, there are always multiple winners. It's always one card out of 12. So exciting. Now, this piece is by Maria. Now, this is an amazing piece. Maria Izquierdo, Izquierdo. That was a tough one. This piece is called Grown Wheat. I'm just going to say Maria. She was born in 1902. She's a Mexican painter, died in 1955. She's best known for being the first Mexican woman to have her artwork exhibited in the United States. Yes, before Frida Kahlo. Beginner's luck, Catherine. She committed both her life and her career to painting art that displayed her Mexican roots. Does this sound like Frida Kahlo? Absolutely, this sounds like Frida Kahlo. If you research Maria is IZ, right? Quierdo. If you research her, you will be shocked at how similar, at least to me, their work looks. Yes, Gaynor, Blue Lion was called. And if you have card number 4, that's the one. I hope you do. It's so similar, right? And there's a lot to be said about this, but her work was almost forgotten because of her political ideas. Remember the art groups, the intellectual groups at that time, if you took design like Frida Kahlo with me, they were revolutionaries, right? They were right at the front of politics, of fashion, of popular culture. But Maria was not, right? She had different political ideas. She was not a revolutionary. She became forgotten quickly, and she has been forgotten over time, although her work is very similar in motif, a lot of very, very graphic / violent work, right? Just very similar to Frida Kahlo, very similar. During her time, she was actually Frida's husband, Diego Rivera, remember? Maria was Diego's star pupil. I don't know anything else about that because remember, he had affairs with everybody I don't know. But he described her work as proud yet modest. Her portraits were mature studies and interpretation, stylistically very feminine, unmistakably Mexican. There's so much to read up about Maria. The sort of her mix of like graphic imagery, body parts, just like Frida, but also folk Catholicism, right? Very traditional rural Mexican subjects, made her very distinctive, and she has been forgotten. So she is one to look at. She should be copyright free too because of the years of her life. Very, very graphic work. So you've been warned, right? So who else have we not gotten to? Carl Larson, and again, I'm not making this call. This is post-show. Carl Larson, let me bring up that image. This one here, absolutely beautiful work. I hope you know this artist, 1853 to 1919. This piece is called Svenda Flicka. He's a very, very famous Swedish painter associated with the arts and crafts movement, worked in many mediums, watercolors, oils, also frescoes. He's known for these depictions of idyllic family life. And again, this is a woman who's sewing, and there's like a reference to weaving behind her, and I thought this would be the one for us to look at together. You know, all the sort of cut work, red work, all kinds of pulled work that the Scandinavians are known for sitting out on the table. So I thought this is really a beautiful painting for us to see. He had a tough life. His parents were very, very poor. His childhood was absolutely miserable. There were all kinds of problems in his family with getting thrown out, with debt, with alcoholism, with abuse. Sorry, I just dropped the page and now I'm looking for which one is the right one. There wasn't a lot about his childhood that you could say was good, happy, idyllic, or even partly normal. But they lived in group situations where multiple families would share one room, like, for free. This is the kind of atmosphere that really was a breeding ground for disease and cholera. And he writes all about this in his autobiography that's called Jag, J-A-G, Jag, or looks like Jag. So his dad was like a casual laborer, and he was a stoker on a ship. He kept losing his job. At one point, his dad owned a local mill, and sort of drank a lot, had a lot of personal problems, not only lost the mill, but later became a carrier, like a grain carrier, working at the mill as a peon at the mill that he once owned. I mean, just a very, very sad story, Carl Larson's life. His mom was a laundress. It's not good. But he ended up at 13. His teacher at this school for poor children saw his talent. You wonder how these things began. And he went to the Royal Swedish School for the Arts. He was admitted early. During his first years there, he was a caricaturist on the paper. He really showed, he's shown his light, right? Like I say to Teddy every morning, shine your little light. He really shone his light. Popularity increased. He became very well known. He immediately got jobs out of school, writing, illustrating, doing watercolors, and he will later become a very important and well-known, celebrated painter in his lifetime. So things can turn around, right? Things do turn around, but a very sad beginning and a happy end, right? I'm glad we ended on a happy end, not like, mental hospital. Did I miss any squares? I was just looking through mine and I was worrying that one of my calls might have fallen, but I feel like I might have gotten all the calls. Do you feel like I accounted for everything on the card? Because it would be almost criminal for me to use art and to not cite it in a live show, right? I don't need that kind of email coming my way. I'm just going to look at my notes. But please tell me, I'm foraging on the ground. Please tell me if you feel like I missed any of those calls, because I would hate to miss any. My papers are telling me it looks all right, but I do make mistakes. I know it's hard to believe, right? Hey, I'll wait for confirmation on that before I log off. I want to say thank you, Suze. I want to say cheers, my dears. I got my flights of fancy glass tonight. It was a wonderful time being together. We had some new buddies on tonight, which is always great. For our new buddies, we run bingo night. We shoot to run it once a month, our game night. And the other 3 nights that are our cocktail nights are usually cozy nights where I do a longer show and we talk about something cozy, usually rug related. And we just kind of cozy in and settle in and have a bit of a romantic night talking and looking at beautiful images. But once a month we play a game, 4 stakes for a win, where there are winners who can then shop. And it's a lot of fun. And yes, Cornel was shown. Absolutely. It's a lot of fun. Martha Cahoon, Barbara, thank you. Martha Cahoon. You know why I skipped that? Because I did Ralph Cahoon. Thank you. Let's do Martha Cahoon. Barbara, thank you. All right, there we go. Nope, that's Ralph Cahoon. Here's Martha. Holy mackerel. Thank you so much. Let's do it. Martha Cahoon. And again, remember, when I go to the Cape, I'm going to go to the Cohun Museum and I'm going to do a bunch of photographs to share with you, because you are going to love the work of both Martha and Ralph. And I want you to see more of it. So this is not Martha Cahoon. Hang on, I'm going to switch pictures. Thank you so much. I'm a completist. I like things to be right. This is Martha Cahoon. This piece is called Up in the Air. I think this is our last piece of the night. Her life is between 1905 and 1999, an American artist. We already know half of her story because I called her husband Ralph. She was the wife of husband and business partner Ralph Cahoon. She was born Martha Farnham in Boston's Roslindale neighborhood to Swedish immigrant parents, very sort of upscale neighborhood. Her dad was Axel Farnham and her mom Elma Erickson. They lived there until the family relocated to the seaside town of Harwich, Massachusetts on Cape Cod in 1915. Although by all accounts Martha was an excellent student, she declined to attend college after her high school graduation, and instead she chose to apprentice full-time for her father, who was a respected furniture decorator, as we know. Working under her father, she quickly mastered the restoration and decoration of antique furniture and started to gain her own reputation as an adept craftswoman. So, why was I? Oh no, Gaynor, the Blue Lion was definitely called. Definitely called. So card number, 4 was the winning card. Blue Lion was the call that won the game. So now this Martha Cahoon piece, if you remember what Ralph's piece looked like, Martha's work was a little bit softer, a little bit rosier, a little bit peachier, a little bit more feminine. Still using old-fashioned costumes, old-fashioned characters, the exact same settings and beaches. Still using mermaids and all of the same tropes, hot air balloons. It's a little bit softer and definitely has that female touch, doesn't it? So beautiful. All of these people looking away from the painter at the hot air balloon. That is the story. Technology, people flying in the sky, even above this big ship, right? It's like a moment in time. It's like a metaphor for where life is going. Even the mermaid is kind of eclipsed in interest. Everybody's looking at these newfangled balloons up in the sky. Just a beautiful, beautiful picture. Thank you so much. I would have thought of that at 3:15 in the morning if I hadn't covered that. Oh, it's so peaceful and happy. It was a great night. It was fun running all these pictures with you. We have a lot to think about. Maybe you got some inspiration tonight. Maybe you're going to go down the rabbit hole this weekend with some of these artists. Get your sketches going, right? Maybe you were inspired to do something with colors or shapes or one of the designs you saw here. Many of the artists that I showed tonight are copyright free, right? You just have to check online whether they are in the public domain. That's very easy to find out. And if you have any questions, you can always write me. Because I'm quite good at this and I know at least about the artists that I covered, whether they are or not. Thank you, Barbara. It was fun to research. It was a great time and I learned a lot too. So we are all ahead. Thank you, Daniela. And congratulations again to the winners. Those of you who are not winners tonight, you are still winners. And next time is a different story, isn't it? It's always a different story. 12 cards every time we play. So have a great weekend, everybody. I will be running around all crazy and busy. I got to finish putting together my packs for the Amish toothbrush class, and I got to get the little toothbrushes on, and we will be putting our rugs together on Sunday. I'm so excited. It's such a relaxing thing to do, working on that kind of a rag rug. So I'll be doing that on Sunday, but I will be back with you on Monday, and we will have some great time together at Coffee Time Live at noon on Monday, noon Eastern Standard Time. Tune in then. I will see you. And in the meantime, if you need me, I'm at ribboncandyhooking@gmail.com. Have a great weekend, everyone.